the SICHAH, we defined the concept of collateral, which was, for example, if an individual wishes to buy a home and for which the individual does not have sufficient funds to buy the home outright, they approach a lending institution who lends the individual money for a fixed period of time to be paid back with interest. The lending institution needs a guarantee of sorts that the money will be repaid. They do so by retaining legal ownership over the home, allowing the buyer to live in the premises for the duration of the loan. The home becomes the collateral. Once the money has been repaid to the lending institution, the collateral is returned to the buyer, who then becomes the legal owner of the property. This is the flip side to collateral, that upon repayment of the loan, the collateral must be returned intact. It was this aspect of collateral that forced Rashi to reject the double Mishkan as referring to the Mishkan and Beit HaMikdash number 1 in favor of Beit HaMikdash number 1 and Beit HaMikdash number 2, the differing levels of Kedusha notwithstanding, in that they both reflected a link between the lower worlds and the upper worlds. Remez leMikdash, the double Mishkan, is a reference to the Mikdash, number 1 and number 2, Shenitma Shekan, both of which were taken as collateral, Bishnei Churbanin. By defining the Churban as a mashkon, as collateral, Rashi is suggesting that the Beit HaMikdash number 1, built by Shlomo HaMelech, not unlike a person who borrows from a lending institution and cannot maintain the payments, was taken from the people on account of the fact that they did not keep their side of the bargain. And therefore, symbolically, the item used as collateral, in this case the Beit HaMikdash, was taken from the nation. As Rashi goes on to state, Al avonotehem shel Yisrael, they eventually broke the covenantal relationship, forcing God, in this case the lender, to reclaim that which he had given to the Bnei Yisrael. 70 years later, and following the events of Purim, God returned the item back to the nation. His presence, the Shekhinah, returned, albeit with a lesser degree of Kedusha concentration. But once again, Al avonotehem shel Yisrael, on account of the collective sin of Bnei Yisrael, 420 years later, the Shekhinah departed from Bnei Yisrael with the Churban of Beit HaMikdash number 2. The Rebbe in the SICHAH takes Rashi's link between Churban and Mashkon one step further, and in doing so redefines the very concept of Churban Beit HaMikdash. Of course, the Churban Beit HaMikdash, both the first and the second, brought total upheaval to the nation, massive loss of life, galut, and so on and so forth. The traditional view is that the Churban came as a punishment from God for the violation of the covenantal agreement by Bnei Yisrael. One cannot argue with this thesis. It is one that is well entrenched in the Jewish belief system of Mipnei Chataenu Galinu Me'artzenu, that Galut was thrust upon us on account of our sins. The opening words to the Musaf Tfilah of the Shalosh Regalim. One can, however, distinguish between Galut as punishment and Churban Beit HaMikdash as a reclaiming of collateral. Rashi, by linking Churban to Mashkon, changes the entire perspective of Churban, in that it did not come as a punishment, but rather a reclaiming of the collateral by HaKadosh Baruch Hu on account of the fact that the nation did not meet its part of the bargain. The role of the Beit HaMikdash, though, did not change, and according to the concept of collateral, the collateral must be returned intact. This took place with Beit HaMikdash number 2 and the return of the Shekhinah to dwell amongst the people. Unfortunately, 420 years later, there was once again a decision by God to reclaim ownership of the structure, this time at the hands of the Romans. In comparing the two views of Churban, there is an advantage that Churban as a mashkon has over Churban as a punishment, in that Churban as a mashkon guarantees the return of the collateral at some point in time in the future. This Rashi reads into the double Mishkan, that Beit HaMikdash number 2 was a return of the collateral taken with Churban Beit HaMikdash number 1. It also opens the door for a future return of the collateral, expressed in the hope of the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash in the Messianic era.